Good morning. Let me introduce myself. My name is Gonzalo León. I'm professor of the telematics engineering at the Technical University of Madrid. I'm also working at the Ministry of Science and Innovation in Spain as a senior policy advisor. It's a pleasure to stay here, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to give this talk. This talk should be focused on one of the probably main lines of work at this moment in using and developing public services where citizens will play a prominent role in the process. Then let me share with you the slides, and then in this way we could also see what is the situation. I understand that you can see the screen now, and then you see the title of this talk will be the citizen-based deployment of ICT data-driven public services, a policy view. My experience is just to give you a summary of the experiences we have had, and then what are the main lines of actions in this field. This is included into the context of open innovation. I don't like to introduce now open innovation, it's very well known, but just to mention that it has been used to accelerate the development of products and services. And why not to use it also to accelerate the deployment of connectivity-based public services over the world. It is based on the idea that several partners could contribute together in order to provide better service in a faster way. In this case, the idea is to engage with citizens, non-professional people that could be involved and commit themselves to participate in this kind of experiences. Obviously, to rely on citizens implies that we need also to have a very good control about this kind of experiences, and we need to understand better what should be the limits and risks of this approach, both from citizens but also from the providers of this kind of public services. The lessons learned in launching this kind of public services in less developed countries, it's important because in many cases the main idea of deploying this kind of services is just well to deploy very complicated and advanced infrastructure, and then also complex operation procedures to use it. And usually, the problem is that in many cases, the public procurement processes are very long, not only to purchase, but also to maintain this kind of services in the future. And then the consequence is that it makes obsolete and expensive to use these initial decisions when the technical area is evolving very fast. On the other hand, we need to be able to provide to the citizens at the end a good feedback about the use of this kind of public services, because if not, they don't feel committed themselves in this kind of thing, and they don't feel that they play any role in deploying and using these services. Then we have here another possible approach. An approach that is not only based on this high-cost fixed equipment deployed in one city, for example, and then to use also the sophisticated knowledge from experts. There is also another possibility, which is just to rely on the typical equipment that everybody has at this moment, the smartphone with an internet access for sure, and then to rely on many people that could be involved in this kind of experiences. The opportunity then is just to rely on this low-cost technology available for many citizens, and then to capture data coming from them with small tasks. Then this data could be processed to provide the basis of a public service. And then again, the information would feed up citizen motivation. Then here, the main idea behind is just to empower citizens as data providers. And then obviously we need to have affordable solutions by using very well designed digital platforms, and then obviously to be sure that people will have low cost smart devices to provide the data. In summary, the idea is the combination of digital platform, smartphone, and distributed network of sensors is enough to create and operate public services in a very innovative and low-cost approach. Main features, well, use citizens as main data providers. They should provide the data, implemented by using their own users' equipment, which is also another advantage because they will take care of this kind of equipment because we're speaking about the personal devices. We need to provide them low-cost sensors if needed, depending on the type of data we need to collect. Involve citizens if possible in the service operation and control to have a good feedback in running the whole operation. To ensure sustainability of a large network of citizens working together, and that implies to design a smart rewarding process for citizens, could be based on money, not necessarily, it depends. And then to provide then the process data we had from the public services. The idea is that they feel themselves involved in the process when they see that the effort they made has produced some benefits for the whole population. And then, and this is also very important, we need to use a transparent and customizable digital platform. Something that a type of platform where users could trust on them. This trustability of the platform and transparency, it's also a very important issue. We'll come back to it. Then schematically, the idea of this kind of citizen-based public services is based on the involvement of a large community of people. It depends, the numbers will depend on the type of service and the area, for instance, covered by the public service. And then they need to have a smartphone and access to mobile service. 3G at minimum, and basically better 4G. But it will depend again on the data to be submitted. And then they need to connect to through an application interface to a digital platform. Digital platform where data from users will be uploaded. And that's enough for them. What happens behind the scenes? Well, the public service operator, the entity at the governmental level who is the responsible for providing this service should obtain this and to collect data from many citizens, and then to set up some kind of procedures to process data, etc., and to move them to the decision-making module. The decision-making module will provide the data presented to authorities for decision-making, but also data presented in an easy way for transparency on usefulness and motivation to citizens. Then at the end, citizens would be also able to access this information, not only the citizens participating in the experience, but maybe also other citizens, because at the end, we're dealing with an open public service. Here, one of the main issues is about the type of digital platform we need to use. At the end, citizens should trust on the platform to participate in this kind of services, not only about the accuracy of the information that at the end they will receive as a feedback, but also on the use of the private data. And then what should be the conditions of the platform to support this kind of citizen-based public service? First of all, we need to be sure that there is a strict control of the use of private data. In some cases, it could be totally transparent. We don't need to know even the identity of the citizens participating there. In other cases, yes. For instance, if we need to have some kind of smart rewarding for them, because obviously we need to pay one specific person. In other terms, probably this kind of plan should have an open source code. To be sure that the code is transparent and everybody could analyze it. Obviously, I should be under strict rules for cybersecurity control and not to provide any side effect on the use of the platform. And then it's also very important, we're speaking about the public services as not a question of having any kind of commercial interest behind. One of the examples of this kind of platforms used today and these pandemic times is very important. It's just the type of rather COVID applications used in several countries as a public service. Then the idea is to provide information for the health organizations in the country to trace the infected people, and then to be able to isolate the contact chains, and then to reduce the probability to expand the pandemic. Then the benefit here depends basically on citizens again, and then the usefulness of the whole service will depend on the number of people using the app. At least it depends, but the health authorities are saying that at least 30% of the total population should use this kind of application in order to obtain good data and then to serve to the purposes of the public service. But here, people should trust on these kind of platforms. In Spain, just an example, but there is a movement supported by many scientists, which they are demanding the government that the source code of the platform should be open and known to check its use. Remember that at the end, the basis for the platform was developed by Google and Apple. And then they say, oh, yeah, everything is okay, but we need to be sure. Then at the end, we are dealing with public services, and it incorporates some kind of commitments that the government should accept in using this kind of things. Then the second point is just to understand what should be the level of the involvement of citizens, because they could do many different things. Obviously, they could participate in the definition of the service. It is like co-creation, which is also part of the open innovation models, where users are also working here by expressing what should be the type of application they need, the type of information they need to receive as a feedback of the process, etc. In other cases, the capability for users participating in the experience is lower. They collect and validate samples to be uploaded to the platform. In some cases, they need to interpret data, basically depending on the role to be played in the network, to disseminate conclusions, and even to extend the network of citizens to facilitate even a better and more useful type of public services. Then you could see here in the right scheme that we could move from a transparent, nothing to do. This is the example of the radar COVID I have mentioned before. They need to download and activate the application on Bluetooth, and that's okay. That is not necessary to do more things. But in other cases, they need to have a very complex activity because they like to have a more proactive role in the process. In the middle, we could find easy tasks for the students. The experiences carried out in Spain with UPM students, students from my university, where hundreds of students were involved in providing data to a digital platform. They were students with a technical basis because they came from telecom and computer engineering, not because the activities were very complicated, just simply because they were my students. They had also smartphones, internet access. In some cases, we need also to provide a more complex network with some routers distributed to them. And then we also developed a smart rewarding based on individual performance, where the activity of the students was rewarded with, depending on the engagement of the students, between 40 up to 80 euros per month, which is, well, relatively interesting amount. And then the consequence was the stability of the network, and the commitment for several months was kept until 97% of the total number of people involved, which is a very good rate in this case. Then we were also, and this was also very important, to identify the type of activities to be performed by users. The concept was just to develop the idea of a micro task. We are assuming that it should be low cost and low time consuming, non-professional tasks. We are speaking for average citizens to capture and upload key data. Then this kind of a micro task will depend on the public service to do that. But anyway, they should fulfill this kind of requirements: low cost, low time, non-professional tasks. The type of data to be provided by students or by citizens will depend on the service. It could be for transportation, for health, for environment, etc. By using smartphones, it obviously depends on that. The selection, the domain or domains of interest will depend on the public authorities. They need to define what is the type of service, what is the type of public services based on citizens they like to implement. And then they need also to demonstrate added value. Very easy procedures for fit up public services. And then they need to provide data coming from the processing of this information to individuals and local authorities for everybody. Obviously, the level of detail may be different. It's not the same for local authorities when they need to make decisions, but the individual should also be able to make decisions based on this information. Obviously, decisions made at the individual level, but it's also very important. Let me put some examples of this kind of public services. One is to collect geodata on traffic situation and road conditions in a zone, from the personal network participants, for instance, to give real-time traffic conditions based on qualitative data. Qualitative because at the end they could fill a template with a matrix of quantitative information about the heavy traffic or not. And also they could be able to upload some photos to the platform, because it could be also help after that in the processing of information about the understanding and analysis of the situation of the traffic. In other cases, it could be to collect the weather conditions in rural areas, or states for crops or forest protection, etc. In these cases, for users, it could obtain some information about how to do at the local level, but for public authorities, it could be also useful if we could combine this kind of information provided by citizens with other type of information, for instance, satellite images. That could complement this information from citizens, not a very, very local area, but a more expanded geographical area, and then to be able, again, to make decisions. Another one is just the use of early warning network for health conditions of population. Here, maybe the participants could have not only smartphones, but also many other kinds of wearables. Wearables could be also more and more useful, because many of them, the new generations of wearables, could provide also a lot of information for health conditions. And it could be also very useful, not only at the individual level, but also as a part of understanding the global situation of health in a large population. But then it could be combined also with the use of other things. For instance, in terms of COVID, it could be useful to control the temperature by producing automatically this kind of information from many citizens, cough, use of masks, etc. Let me deep into one of them. It's just to collect public geographical data, low-cost sensors on several parameters which are important, CO2, for instance, plugging in smartphones to obtain real-time public maps of pollution. This is important because at the end it's also related to health decisions about, for instance, decisions made by public authorities to reduce the traffic or to control to enter into a part of the population, part of the city where the data set that the conditions are worsening. Then in this case, the information to be provided by citizens, even manually, could be done regularly, several times a day, when some measurements overpass predefined thresholds. If they have a sensor, they could obtain a warning, it is overpassing the threshold, and then I need to submit to the platform to upload some information. Obviously, in this case, they need to have low-cost sensors connected to smartphones in order to obtain information from this kind of factors. Again, We could also have a monthly rewarding to participants based on performance and commitment, data collection and graphical presentation of the results. She has to have this kind of maps in different colors about the situation of the city, and then citizens could obtain this information via their own smartphones. Here, in this kind of services, one of the key elements is just to be able to have low-cost sensors. Well, low cost is a relative measure for sure, but we need here to identify what should be the minimum quality of the sensor and what should be the factors to be measured. The range of cost will change a lot from 100 euros, the minimum cost of a sensor like that, to 1,000. Even compared to sophisticated fixed stations with 10,000 euros or more, it means that we have here a huge range of possibilities depending on our interest. Then it also depends on the type of periodical values to measure, of air quality. Maybe dust particles, to put an example, is important. Maybe depending on the country, where dust particles is also very important to protect people with some problems in their lungs, light intensity, humidity, etc. And then there are also many technical approaches for that, yeah, depending on the connection to a smartphone. Bluetooth could be a solution. And then also, what is the quality of measurements we need to provide quality data to make decisions? In these cases, to experiment on this kind of public services, this is not a key issue, because at the end, the objective is to test how to deploy this kind of public services. In a city, we need to distribute the area to be covered for one specific person that like to participate in the experience, and then to cover the whole city or the part of the city we need to control the pollution. And then to provide some kind of procedure for measurements for each of this area for one citizen that like to have a cycle of measurements like that, moving from one part to another several times a day. Then each area could have a limited number of data capture. In our experiences, the total time to be devoted to that is about 10-15 minutes per day. 15 minutes per day is not a very large amount of time, but we need to reward this effort. There are many types of possibilities technically, and then I don't like to enter here, but just only a message. Technology is ready. And even the cost of sensors are decreasing every day. Obviously, we have some kind of risks in deploying this kind of services. And then we need to understand it. First of all, we need to be sure that the commitment of citizens will stay there for several months to run the experiences. If we have an experience with 500 citizens, well, if some of them abandon, 5, 6, 8, 10 is not very relevant. But if the abandon is very large, probably we will have a problem because the quality of the service will be at risk. On the other hand, we need to consider all kinds of risks depending on the data quality and processing. Obviously, if data are very bad, photos cannot be read, etc. Well, obviously, we cannot make decisions on that. We'll have then associated to that technology limitations. It depends on the quality of the smartphone, quality of the network, quality of the sensors, and so on. And then we need also to deal with administrative and regulatory constraints. It depends on the country, but sometimes in order to deploy this kind of public services, we need to have the administrative basis to do that. Even in Spain, we had a problem to pay small amount of money per month to a lot of people, which also implies the development of specific procedures to that in one public university, which is not so easy. Then again, this kind of main primary causes of risks would have secondary sources or tertiary sources, etc. This is a more complex example. I don't like to enter into details, but just also to mention something about the citizen commitment, you see that one of the secondary causes is because we'll have a high rate of abandons, or low interest to participate, or simply because they have a lack of experience in community participation. They don't feel themselves committed enough to participate here. Anyway, each public service should have an associated risk management structure in order to anticipate these kind of problems and to develop the mitigation techniques that which are necessary to address this kind of risks. Then what are the end of the consequences from the policy view? First of all, from public administrations, is an opportunity to develop open innovation-based governance procedures for public services. It's something different. It is to be closer to citizens at the end. Obviously, we need also to have this kind of services with the capability to scale up. To scale up not only in terms of people participating there, but also to be able to move these kind of experiences from one region to another, or even to one public services to another. Then I think that here there is a responsibility of public governments to be able to obtain a good basis to expand the use of this kind of services. We need also to monitor the quality of services performed by common citizens. The techniques and the procedures we are using today in order to assess the quality of public services inside administrations are not enough, because we are dealing with people which are not part of the administration itself. Then we need also to see what should be the distribution of responsibilities between governments and other institutions in the service deployment and the operation, trust and confidence on the use of private data. We need to demonstrate it. And then to have a good analysis of the lessons learned to be able to improve in the future. In the case of academic and research institution that has also participated in the process, as a public university, my university last year, was also important because it was also useful to raise the interest of students about the sustainable development goals. The awareness of environmental problems, for instance, in the communities, to feel responsible and useful to society. And even we have considered that should be part of a STEM curricula, than to provide it as for engineers, in my case, the capability to say, oh, I have participated in this kind of public services as a part of my engineering curricula, which is also relevant. And then several countries are working in this field. There's also a capability to boost the stronger cooperation with local administration, just to work together. It's a co-creation of this kind of services at the end, and also the involvement of local communities to leverage environmental concerns. To reinforce the value of international cooperation, where we need to also to expand it, not only in one country, but even in several countries with research centers, telecom operators, equipment providers, etc. This is a very good example of the use of open innovation in the context of sustainable development goals. Let me conclude here. Unfortunately, the traditional deployment of ICT public services could be ineffective and time-consuming processes, and then we need to have a very good, stable administrative support to be sure that these public services will continue in the future. The provision of ICT public services could be based in other approaches. Could be based on open innovation network, digital platforms, mobile networks, personal smartphones, low-cost devices like sensors, and so on. Then citizen-based public services based on microtax could combine the voluntary responsible commitment of citizens, enforced, if necessary, by smart rewarding models. And my feeling is that we have here a huge opportunity to experiment on this kind of citizen-based public services. This is underway, and we need to experiment on them. This is the type of information I had to like to say. I will try to finish now. The idea is just to offer you a global understanding about the evolution of these public services. Thank you very much for your attention.